Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Sam Smyers. I wanted to go over some drum production. This is going to be for my song Want You, and these are in the style of Moombahton, tropical house, a little bit of reggaeton influences, and I just wanted to kind of show you how I produce these drums and maybe show you how you can kind of like get those influences in your songs. So let me just play some clips of it real quick so you can hear it.
You're the only one, you're the only one, the one that I wanted, one that I wanted. I can love who I want, I don't need a reason. Love who I want, love who I want you. I can love who I want, I don't need a reason. Love who I want you.
Okay, so let's start with the kick. So the kick is just some sample. I think I pulled it from like some free pack somewhere. But it sounded pretty good, didn't really do too much to it. And so this is the main kick right here. I just have a EQ8 that I have automated for the verses because I wanted to cut off some of the lower frequencies during the verses to give more impact to whenever the drop happens, so that there's more low frequencies in kind of that drop. So here is with some of those low frequencies cut, and here's with them, and that's with them back in. So I do that for the verses, and the first verse I cut off a little more, and then I add back a little bit more low frequency in the second verse. So on the first verse, you can see I have it cut right here at 90 hertz. Then I go to about 56 for the drop, and then I go back up to about 80 or so for the second verse. So that's kind of the main kick, and then I actually add in some other details to the second part of the drop. So for this part, I kind of add a more reggaeton sounding kick. And this is common like reggaeton music where you have that percussive like boom, dot, boom, dot rhythm. And so I add that in during the second half of the drop. And then I also add in some higher frequency stuff with another kick sample. And that's right here. So you can see I just cut off the low end right here because it was a regular kick, and I just cut off the low end because I already had the low end from this main kick. And so all together that sounds like this. And then with the track, it sounds like this. So that's the main part of the kick, and then let's go up to the snare or percussion element for that drop. So that's the percussion or the snare part. And basically what that is, I just pulled this sample from Splice that is right here, and it sounded like this. And so what I did is I pitched it up, and made it sound like that. So you can hear actually for the second, each the second time that this rhythm happens, you can hear a little more reverb on the second one. And so actually I kind of cut this, like on the sample there was some reverb, so I think I just cut a little more the first time and then a little less the second time, kind of like this. And so with that percussion in, so that's what that sounds like. And let's see. I have some top loops. I like to put in top loops to kind of fill in the drums a little more. And this one I just have some hi-hat stuff going on. I have a little bit of widening going on. I use a simple delay to do some widening, and Nicky Romero has this thing called Kickstart, which kind of automatically side chains. So I have this side chaining, the top loop with kick, and then of course I have an EQ8 to cut off any kind of low end, just in case there is any low end in that loop, because we don't want it anyway. So the next big part of that drop is going to be a hi-hat. And so that's just I don't know, it looks like a Lex Luger sample that I have. I don't think I have any processing on it except for just like a EQ8. I'm taking out some of the high range stuff because it must have been a little too high. The frequencies must have been a little too high. And so you can get creative with your hi-hat rhythms. This one's fairly simple. Yeah, it looks pretty simple here. So I just bring that in the second half of the drop. And then I have some like tom fills to make it interesting. This one's probably another like splice sample. And it looks like I'm automating the volume so that it kind of rises into the drop. So it doesn't start out so loud and it kind of builds up into the drop. And then I also have this little thing going on. So I have these two right before the drop kicks in. And I use drum rack sometimes when I'm doing like random percussion stuff. So you can see I just labeled this like Rando percussion, like random percussion. And this looks like a timbale sample. And so that's what that sounds like. And it looks like I have like a lot of reverb on there. But that's really it. So that sounds like. And also to give that a little more beef, I have these toms under it again, which I used to introduce the hook. So I have them right here also, just to give it a little more beef. Otherwise it would sound like that without it. So if I just solo those drums, so that's the drums for the drop. And then let's go through some of the rim percussion that I use in the verse. So I'm using a different rim shot for the verse for the snare, and that is just composed of, let's see, this sample together. The rhythm is a little different. Just to vary it up from the drop to the verse. And let's see. Just have an EQ8 on that first sample here. Second one, I didn't process it at all. And then of course the kick, I have some of the low frequency cut off. Let me see what else I have on the kick. I have a C6. It looks like I just kind of used one of the stock presets on the C6. Looks like house kick. So I must have liked that sound. And then have a VC76, which is Native Instruments version of the 1176. If you have waves, I think it's called the CLA 76. Without it. With it. I think it looks like this is just like a parallel because I have some of this dry on. Yeah, so I'm actually using a kick parallel. It must have just been this thing right here. So I'm using parallel compression there. So that all together with the song.
Say what is true, so many mistakes. I need a change, I'm lucky I found you. Barely breathing, I turned it around. You gave me something new to believe in.
So that little vibra slap right here, that I have on this Rando Percs track. And see, I have a bunch of things in here on this drum rack. Some timbales, wood block, vibra slap. So there's the vibra slap, and then the wood block is right there. So I like to just kind of go through random percussion samples, put them onto a drum rack, and throw them in to spice things up a little bit, make them a little more interesting in the track.
Something new to believe in. I will no longer feel like the broken hearted.
And so this is the same top loop that I'm using during the drop section. And And I'm automating the volume a little bit for the verse, just so it's not as loud, and a little bit more in the background.
I will no longer feel like the broken hearted. Better, stronger with you now than when I started. You're the only one. You're the
And then same thing with the hi-hats. The hi-hats from the drop, I'm bringing in again in the second verse only. I'm not putting them in the first verse, but just to make the second verse a little different, I'm adding in these hi-hats. And
I will no longer feel like the broken hearted. Better, stronger.
that rhythm is this. Fairly straightforward. And so all together with the track, it sounds like this.
I will no longer feel like the broken hearted. Better, stronger with you now than when I started. You're the only one. You're the only one. The one that I.
And then just the drums by themselves during that verse part. So let me go to the build sections.
Want it. I can love who I want. I don't need a reason. Love who I want. Love who I want. I want you. I can love who I want. I don't need a reason. Love who I want. Love who I want. I want you.
Okay, so it's always good to have some kind of it's always nice to have some kind of thing building in those sections right before the drop. I like to use some form of snare build, and usually that's kind of some rhythm that gets a lot faster and builds. Maybe I transpose the sound up, or maybe I make it louder, or maybe I put a filter on it. I think this snare build, I have it transposed at the end. As well as you can see the rhythm gets a lot faster. So to transpose up a snare to make it sound like that, make sure that this is all one clip. So if you have individual snare clips, so if I have like if I put this snare down and I put these snare downs and I have like all these individual clips, go ahead and select them all. So I just did shift click and then consolidate them, and then that would make a whole one clip, and then you can just work with that entire clip and transpose parts of it. So I have this as one clip. I consolidated it all, and then I just go to this envelopes, and you get to this envelopes by clicking this little button right here, and transposition modulation, and then you use your automation right here. So I automated it up all the way to 6, I guess, at the end. And so that's what that sounds like. And so this one, I didn't really change the rhythm. I just added automation for the high frequency. So you can see here, it's filtered, and then it gets louder for the second part, or not louder, but I bring back in the higher frequencies whenever I start building in the second part. And then also to get some more rhythm, I add in a clap. there's nothing. I didn't put anything on that. It's just the sample Drake clap. All right, so that's what that build sounds like altogether. So you can create these on your own finding good snare samples and, you know, make a couple of different tracks of snares and just try and put them all together. You can maybe find some kind of build on Splice, but yeah, put some kind of build, whether that be snares or risers or white noise in these drop sections, and I'll play this with everything together.
I can love who I want, I don't need a reason. Love who I want, love who I want, I want you. I can love who I want, I don't need a reason. Love who I want, love who I want, I want you.
So if I take those out,
I can love who I want, I don't need a reason. Love who I want, love who I want you. I can love who I want, I don't need a reason. Love who I want, love who I want you.
You can tell it just sounds super empty and doesn't really build to anything. So that's why it's important to kind of like have these builds during your kind of like breakdown sections.
Nothing holds us down. All my dreams came true.
So it looks like I have another just timbale fill when I go into the bridge of this song. So after the hook, I have a bridge.
All my dreams came true. I can be with you. You're all I needed. We're good, good, so good. Now that you're around.
And so see, I'm kind of throwing in these random percussions.
Good.
That's just a wood block. Pretty common in Christmas music, actually.
All my dreams came true. I can be with you.
So I'm actually using the same percussion that I use in the drop for the bridge.
All my dreams came true. I can be with you. You're all I needed. We're good.
And I'm using the top loops that I use in the drop, and I'm using the low bongo loop, which I use for the second time that the drop comes in. And that's just like another top loop. And so I have, this is just, looks like some saturation on this. And then I have some, looks like some mid-side processing with EQ8. So I'm just cutting off any low information that might be in that top loop. And then for the sides, I'm cutting off some of the higher frequencies. And then I have a kickstart to sidechain it. That's without the sidechain. With the sidechain. And this is without the EQ. And that's with the EQ. So yeah, without, with.
All my dreams came true. I can be with you. You're all I needed. We're good, good, so good. Now that you're around, nothing holds us down. You're all I needed. We're good, good, so good. Yeah, I can love who I want. I don't need a reason. Love who I want.
And so basically this part is the same drums that I have in the drop, and the chorus vocal is kind of singing over that drop part, but I'm taking out the lead sound
Good, good, so good. Yeah, I can love who I want. I don't need a reason. Love who I want. Love who I want. I want you. I can love who I love. I don't need a reason. Love who I want. Love who I want. I want you.
So let's see what processing I have overall on the drum bus. So whenever I do all my drums, I usually send them to a bus so that I can, solo them like this and separate them out and listen to how everything is sounding. So it looks like I have this Native Instruments Vari compression on here, and looks like there was just some drum bus preset that I used. It's adding some volume, and then I have this. I was testing this out. This strange like limiter, looks Russian, and I was using it as a soft clipper. So I'm kind of clipping some of the transients on the drums so that I can kind of raise the overall volume, and so that when I send it to the master bus compressor, it's not gonna the transients aren't gonna mess up the compression for other elements of the song. And then I have a decapitator, which is another good plugin for adding saturation. That's it without it. And that was it with it. And then I'm also just have a low cut on here at like 18. I mean, you can't even hear any frequencies under about 20 hertz. So there's no reason to have anything under 20 hertz coming out of the drums, since we can't even hear it anyway. And then looks like I'm just doing some additional stuff up in here. So I think that's about it. Yeah, if you have any questions, or if you want to grab stems to these, to maybe use any of these and sample them, any of these tracks, you can do that too. I'll put a link on the video, and if you like the song, if you liked anything I went over, or if you want to know more, just let me know, and hit subscribe and like the video and share it if you liked it. Thanks a lot.